Why, hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another Genestealer cultist video here on Nerdvana. On our previous video, we covered the army special rule of Cult Ambush. And now we're going to move on to the detachments, opening up with the Biosantic Broodsurge. Can I hear a hashtag muscle beach? Now, all Genestealer cults seek to usurp the corrupt and oppressive powers of the authorities that rule over them upon the planets that they occupy, but not all Genestealer cults see eye to eye in the manner of which they are to achieve this end goal. Some cults prefer to stay to the shadows, popping out, taking the enemy by surprise, screaming, "I'm Batman!" But unlike Batman, this lot don't take prisoners. Then there are others that believe they're on the set of Mad Max Fury Road, screeching around on dune buggies and motorcycles, believing that speed makes right. But then we come to the Biosantic Broodsurge, the Muscle Beach, and like the speed freaks that I've just mentioned, these guys believe that might makes right. Power is power and strength is strength. And who can argue? A pickaxe to the head is certainly going to solve most arguments. And they are described within the book as follows. When insidious subtlety alone cannot secure a cult's ambitions, a Biosantic Broodsurge is released to overcome the most stubborn of impediments to the spread of a patriarch's progeny, or to savage the oppressor's behemoths of war as they try to stamp the cult out. The most monstrous elements of the cult fight at the fore, using their gene-twisted muscle and hyper-adapted claws to tear the enemy apart in shock assaults. Packs of aberrants lumber instinctively towards the foe, severing limbs and spilling gore with every sweeping weapon blow. Hybrid broodkin, blessed by the insane alchemy of the biophaguses, run alongside them, their bodies seething with newly grown mutations. Some of these forces are honored with the presence of the patriarch himself, darting from the shadows with its pure-strained scions to rip through flesh and armor alike. The cult's creed roars out, whilst imperatives wash through the minds of reinforcements fighting in the Blessed One's wake. Faithful inspired to witness such a gathering of holy forms. Which is a poetic way of saying when subtlety fails, send in the big boys and hit them with a hammer. And this brutish way of war is represented on the battlefield with the detachment rule of Hypermorphic Fury. Again, this is described within the book as little can assuage a Genestealer cult's least human instincts, behaviors made even more ferocious under provocation. Stimulated by psionic pulses of the brood mind or fueled by alchemical concoctions delivered from alien grafts, impulses drive the blessed to acts of increased savagery. Now, as I say on the battlefield, what this means is as follows. Add 1 to the charge rolls made for aberrants, biophagus, and pure strain Genestealer units from your army. In addition, each time a unit is selected to fight it, if it made a charge move this turn until the end of the phase, add 1 to the attack characteristics of melee weapons equipped by models in that unit. Rather spicy indeed. Now, as far as detachments go, for GSC players, this is one that we've been waiting for a very, very long time. You can imagine why. I mean, simply for the fact of the rule of cool to start off with. Fielding an army of aberrants and genestealers. I mean, that's what it's all about, right? True Xenos goodness. I'm going to have an Inquisitor visit me tonight. I can tell. I'm going to burn for saying such things. But it's true. You know, if you're a Xenos player, I mean, you want to field your most Xenos models. But on top of that, when you consider that aberrants at the beginning of 10th, during our index reign, so to speak, aberrants were an auto-include. Aberrants were by far the best models in our army. And so being able to field an army of that, I mean, yeah, of course. I mean, everyone had at least 10 aberrants in their army. And if you didn't, why the hell not? They were amazing. But the astute, of course, amongst you will notice I'm using the past tense, and aberrants have taken a mighty good whack from the nerf bat during this codex. Now, are they still good? Yes. Are they as good as they used to be? No. Are they overpriced in regards to points? Yes, possibly. They still need a point degrade because the nerf bat really, really, really hit them hard. They're a shadow of their former selves. In fact, they're a shadow of their former selves. But could this detachment rule of Hypermorphic Fury carry them a little bit? Maybe that's why GW hit them so hard, because, you know, a whole army of reasonably good aberrants fueled by Hypermorphic Fury, would that be overkill? Well, that's a discussion for in just a moment. But wait. Let's take a step back for a second and regards the greater picture. Because, of course, aberrants are but one prong upon a trident of units that benefit from this detachment rules. The other prongs being the pure strain genestealers and the one everyone always forgets, the Biophagous units. Now, you may be, sitting there and go, Big Al, what do you mean? What do you mean, Big Al? Biophagous units. Yes, it's mentioned there, but that's just a character. A character that's going to be joining aberrants anyway, so no big deal. But no. This is where the magic comes. Because when a Biophagous, or indeed any character, joins a unit, they bestow their keywords upon that unit and vice versa. And so when a Biophagous, or the Biophagi in your army, because you're going to be taking multiples, I can assure you, join a unit, that unit itself becomes a Biophagous unit. What's that mean in plain speak? It means that whatever unit you join your Biophagous to will benefit from the special rules. And Biophagi can attach not only to aberrants, but here's the key bit, guys. They can also join acolyte hybrids, hybrid metamorphs, and neophyte hybrids. And so the detachment rule within this detachment not only is able to benefit aberrants and pure strain genestealers, it can affect acolytes, neophytes, and metamorphs. And so with that realization, you see that this detachment rule not only benefits now 2 units and a character unit, it now affects 5 units and a character unit. Where all you have to do to apply your detachment rule to those units out of its normal scope of range is pay a small character tax. You just have to buy a Biophagous and attach it to a different unit. And that, my friends, is a small tax to pay, because a Biophagous, I mean, that's one of our best characters in the codex, right? You're probably bringing 3 anyway. Predictable and one-dimensional have been the grumblings about this detachment since it was first released. But now that you can see how it's so easy to add variety to your army and thus reduce that one-dimensional capacity that we saw in armies which just consisted purely of aberrants and genestealers, well, you can see those arguments, those criticisms, those grumbles no longer stand up and apply. And so now that we are armed with a fully comprehensive understanding and knowledge of what the detachment rule is and whom it applies to, we can now move on to look at the enhancements and stratagems of the Biosantic Broodsurge. And just one quick mention before we go on to the enhancements regards a change to a datasheet that's pretty key and relative to what we're about to discuss in enhancements, is that the Patriarch datasheet has been changed somewhat. Not a lot, but he's no longer an epic character. Why is this important? Well, it means he can take enhancements now. So any of these enhancements that he qualifies for, he can take. That's going to be fun. And so first up, we look at the enhancement called Predatory Instincts. Here's the fluff behind it. With alien senses and instincts, augmented with hyper-adaptive gene strands, this chosen of the cult leads the way deep into enemy lines, like a toxic barb working its way to the heart. Rules-wise, this enhancement can be given to an Abominant, a Biophagus, or a Patriarch. And its effects are as follows. Models in the bearer's unit have the Infiltrator's ability, and once per battle round, you can target the bearer's unit with the Heroic Intervention stratagem for 0 CP, and can do so even if you have already targeted a different unit with that stratagem this phase. So first of all, this has come straight out the gates. This is one hell of an enhancement. It is really good. It is pretty pricey. It comes in at 30 points, but it's fantastic given to the right unit. Now, a Patriarch can take Predatory Instincts. It is completely worthless to him, really, because he can infiltrate anyway, alongside the Genestealers that he can be attached to. So the only reason you would give it to him is to be able to use the Heroic Stratagem for free. Why would you pay 30 points for that? I mean, it's a great strategy, but you're not going to use it. I mean, it's a complete waste of points. So just remove the Patriarch from this. You're not going to give it to him. But the Abominant and Biophagus, yeah, these are absolutely, cracking options. I mean, the Abominant, this is the guy you're going to give it to. I mean, I don't know why I'm going on discussing this, but, maybe there are other reasons you would want to give it to the Biophagus, but we'll just focus first of all on the Abominant. The Abominant is definitely 100% the guy you want to give it to, because you want to get those aberrants up close and personal ASAP. Especially now they're not as tough as they used to be. They only have a 5-up feel in their pain and not a 4-up feel in their pain. You now have to get them as close to the enemy as possible, or where you need them at least, from turn 1. That is just amazing. And being able to have the Heroic Intervention stratagem as just a little bonus extra also, even better. That I can just tell you now, as a Wild Eater player, because as you guys know, I play GSC, Guard, and Wild Eaters. Heroic interventions are actually very good when used correctly at interrupting charges and protecting units you don't necessarily want in combat. So, yes, giving it to the Abominant, a unit that definitely wants to get into combat, so definitely going to benefit from heroic intervention as much as possible, and just gets them up and close and personal as soon as possible. I mean, he's a no-brainer, right? I mean, quite literally, probably. Does he have any brains? I don't know. But regards to the decision on who to give it to, I mean, it's almost a given that you're going to want to try and find 30 points to give an Abominant in your army, this special rule. But the Biophagus still is an option according to what unit you attach him to. The only ones I can really kind of think of, there's a couple, but Metamorphs, yeah, these are great in combat also. Being able to give them infiltrate, kind of, it's a two-edged sword. By attaching a Biophagus to a Metamorph unit, they're going to lose their Scout special rule. But if you can give them infiltrators instead, that kind of compensates. So it's a way of getting around the fact that you're losing one special rule by adding a Biophagus, but in return for that, they get their detachment rule, they get heroic intervention, and they also get infiltrators. There's just some payoff there. There's something, that you might be able to find work. I haven't play tested it yet, but it could be worthwhile. And the only other thing I could think of, I don't really know if this is an option, but it's something, again, to consider, is attaching a Biophagus to some acolytes with demo charges. You can get them up quick and personal then pretty early on. If demo charges hadn't been nerfed as much as they have, that would definitely be an option, but is it so much now? I don't know. Demo charges aren't quite as good as they used to be, but it's still, again, an option that you could playtest. Put some acolytes up with Hound Flamers up as far up into your enemy's grill as you can early on, and using them maybe to overwatch with those demo charges. It's an option, but let's be frank about it. You're going to be wanting to give those Predatory Instincts to an Abominant instead. If you've given it to the Biophagous, you kind of... yeah, it's a kind of consolation prize. As I said, the only potential option for me, but it would have to be playtested, is Biophagous with Metamorphs. Because again, they want to be in combat also. So a really, really good enhancement. Enhancements can make or break a detachment. You know, even if you've got the best detachment rule out there, if you've got crap enhancements, and certainly if you've got crap strategems, you know, this can make, as I say, make and break a detachment. So straight out the gate, straight away, first enhancement, that's an A+, if not S tier, with the right unit. Next one is the Biomorph Adaptation. The fluff behind this is the power of the Star Children flows through this creature's veins, their physiology showing unnatural gifts and lethal enhancements. On the battlefield, this adaptation can be given to Abominants or Patriarchs, and it improves the armor penetration and damage characteristics of melee weapons equipped by that bearer by 1. Now this comes in at 15 points, so half the cost of Predatory Instincts, but it's actually, again, really good and very much worth every point that you give. The Abominant Patriarch are literally the only models you would want to give this to anyway. You wouldn't want to give it to a Biophagous. And whether you give it to either Abominant or Patriarch, you're doing well. Both of them will really, really benefit from this particular enhancement. With the Patriarch going up to 5 attacks at weapon skill 2, strength 6, AP 3, and damage 3, yeah, he can really make mincemeat out of your opponent and becomes, you know, a Terminator killer potentially with that profile. Whereas the Abominant has 4 attacks at weapon skill 3, strength 12, AP negative 3, same as the Patriarch, but this time a massive damage of D6 plus 2. So minimum of 3 damage, potentially a damage of 8. And so the Abominant can really benefit from it. You know, depends what you're going after. He potentially becomes a really good tank killer at that point, whereas the Patriarch becomes more of a Space Marine stroke Terminator killer at that point. Well, it's already a Space Marine killer, but he becomes a Terminator killer with this particular enhancement. So really depends what you're going for. In my particular army list, I have the Patriarch, but, you know, Abominant or Patriarch, they're both very viable options. Next up, we have Mutagenic Regeneration. Here's the fluff. Though the truth may lie with cocktails of alchemical enzymes or Xenos hormones triggering ferocious metabolic renewal, the cult's masses see this nigh-immortal leader as a vessel of divine favor. This particular enhancement can be given to any of the main characters, so the Abominant, Biophagous, or Patriarch, and in each command phase, one model in the bearer's unit regains 1 lost wound. So another excellent enhancement for this detachment. This detachment really shines in its enhancement so far, and the detachment rule, they're all grade A, if not grade S. Very, very, very good. Mutagenic Regeneration particularly is great in the sense that you gain 1 lost wound each command phase. That's not just your command phase, but the opponent's command phase also, and that's really the key to making this particularly good. So per turn, essentially gaining up to 2 wounds. Now, obviously, this benefit will only be felt in units with multi-wound models. It doesn't bring dead models back, or if it did, that would actually be really, really good. So you're going to have a wounded model in your unit which has multiple wounds on its profile. And so it's only of use within either aberrant units or pure strain Genestealers. Now, for me, the unit of choice would be Aberrants. Yes, Genestealers can benefit from this, but they only have 2 runes on their profile, so can only benefit from it at sort of 1 command phase at a time. And as I say, because this works in not only your command phase, but the opponent's command phase, the best way to get the benefit out of that, essentially get 2 runes in a turn, is to attach it to an Aberrant unit. Or more accurately, a character that is attached to an Aberrant unit. So that would either be an Abominant or a Biofagus. Last but not least, within the enhancements, we have Alien Majesty, described as an aura of palpable grandeur that surrounds this individual, their mere presence a powerful stimulant to the nerve of their followers, and a carrying nimbus to subjugate tyrannical foes. This enhancement can be given to either an Abominant, Biofagus, or Patriarch. And whilst an enemy unit is within engagement range of the bearer's unit, subtract 1 from the objective control characteristic of models in that enemy unit to a minimum of 1. And so yet again, another truly excellent enhancement within this detachment. It's very rare to find a detachment with a full house of enhancements that are usable and very good at that. It's very rare indeed, and Alien Majesty, as I say, certainly is an excellent, perhaps actually the best enhancement that we see here, because even though it's a little less flashy, Alien Majesty can actually, it plays the game, right? Warhammer 40k is a game of circles, as Mordian Glory would describe. It is a game of objectives. And Alien Majesty plays directly into that prime objective, so to speak, to take enemy territory. Ultimately, this would benefit you mostly on a unit that is just going to go straight at the enemy and try to take their home or middle objectives as quickly as possible. You go in, you attack, but let's say you whiff a little bit on your attack. You don't wipe out the unit, or you don't kill as many as you thought you might. You know, even if you're going up against 20 guardsmen, very easy to kill, because they've got OC2 per model and, 20 models per unit if they're maxed out. That's quite a lot of OC control that you kind of have to cut your way through. And just whiffing a couple of attacks can mean the difference between taking an objective and losing it ultimately. And that means you can lose the game. Just not having one objective for one turn can lose you the game. And so Alien Majesty is an absolute steal at only 10 points. It's very easy to get in your army, and I would always say take it if you find you've got spare points. And so that concludes our assessment of the enhancements within the Biosantic Broodsurge. My leaving comment is they're all good. You can't go wrong with any of them. As I say, if you have to take one, and only one, perhaps Alien Majesty is the best, although, my personal preference is Predatory Instincts. It's just so good, but it is expensive at 30 points. It's so much harder to get into your army. You have to commit points to be able to take that. But as I say, if you can't, if you have to choose one and only one, ultimately it's Alien Majesty that's going to potentially win you games more than anything else. Now, of course, we move on to the strategems. So far, the Biosantic Broodsurge looks great. It's got a great detachment role that actually applies to more units than what you would otherwise think at first cursory glance. It's got an excellent selection of enhancements, every single one of them being a viable option to take, which is rare in detachments. Normally, there's at least one enhancement. You go, why would I take that, right? But now we move on to stratagems, and this is really key, because having a good set of stratagems can make or break a detachment. Even though we've got great enhancements, even though we've got a great detachment rule, if our stratagems are worthless, you might as well leave this detachment at home. So we need to go through this and make sure that we've got at least 1 or 2 stratagems that we're going to be using turn in, turn out, be able to get true value out of this detachment. And so with that in mind, we start off with Evasive Vanguard, described as an adaptive and intelligent The purest of occult broods can evade their foes to find new avenues of ingress. On the battlefield, it means that when any phase just after an enemy unit ends a move within 9 inches of one or more of your cult ambush markers, before removing those markers from the battlefield, you must target one pure strength Genestealers unit from your army in cult ambush. When you do so, select one of those cult ambush markers. You can move that cult ambush marker up to 6 inches. If that marker is still within 9 inches of one or more enemy units, it is removed from the battlefield. Otherwise, until the end of the battle, you can only select pure strain Genestealer units from your army to be set up using that cult ambush marker. Now, every detachment within the GSC Codex essentially has a variation of this stratagem, one that interacts with your cult ambush marker that I described in the previous video. If you haven't seen it already or don't understand exactly what cult ambush markers are, go watch that video, right? But ultimately, this stratagem interacts with your cult ambush markers and gives them a second chance at staying on the battlefield. If your enemy is to get within proximity of those markers, is to move within 9 inches of them, then you get this, as I say, this second chance to preserve them and move them away from the enemy and still bring on troops, but with a further restriction added to that cult ambush marker, typically being in that you can only bring on one type of unit after moving it, after preserving it, ultimately. Now, from a fluff perspective, what does this mean? Well, ultimately, it kind of shows how Genestealers infiltrate the battlefield, okay? We've all seen the film Aliens, you know, with the motion sensor going beep, 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 you know, that kind of thing, right? As the blip gets closer and closer, and then the Marines go out, but they can't see where they've gone. Well, it's because the aliens, the xenomorphs in this case, are kind of going through the ceiling instead of, you know, where the Marines were originally expecting them. And it's kind of what happens on the battlefield here. You know, the enemy, the opponent, their troops, they move into a position where, you know, they've got suspicion there's a presence of enemy Genestealers, your Genestealers, and they go to wipe them out. They've got their flamers turned on, ready to go. They've got grenades. They've got all the armaments, and they're going to go, yeah, we're going to wipe them out. They don't know we're coming. But the Genestealers, you know, they're intelligent, right? These aren't stupid, feral creatures. These are peak evolutionary predators. And so they detect the enemy coming, and so they move. They scuttle off 6 inches in this case, in a different direction. They hide somehow. They prevent themselves from being discovered and then pop up and take that enemy by surprise instead. Now, Evasive Vanguard, as a result, is a very good stratagem because it essentially allows you to do essentially a bait and switch with the enemy. The enemy moves in, trying to remove a potential marker, thinking, yeah, they're going to do it. You play Evasive Vanguard for 1 CP, and you can move that marker, and then all of a sudden the enemy is exposed. They've moved in out of position ultimately to try and go after this cult ambush marker, but they've got nothing in return for moving out of position. That cult ambush marker is preserved, and instead then come on the turn after or whatever, they come on with some new Genestealers that can potentially wipe that unit out. So as I say, cult ambush markers in the previous video, they're kind of a hit and miss, right? We all know that, but they have a secret hidden value. Yes, they can be removed, and yes, there's a lot of caveats to getting them, like rolling a 5 up in that, but if you get them, you can use them not only to bring units back, but to draw the enemy out of position, as I've just described there, and then simply move them either with the stratagem or with an exo, for example, and you move them out of the way, and all of a sudden the enemy finds them out of position, and you can essentially wipe them out without any real resistance. So as far as stratagems go, actually quite good. And as I say, the fluff aspect of this is that it scuttles off 6 inches. That's not the same with every detachment. They all move in a slightly different way, and can be replaced in a certain different way. But the Evasive Vanguard moving 6 inches essentially shows the Genestealers physically moving into a slightly different, unexpected position within a local proximity. And you don't want them far at the end of the day. You want them to pop up fairly close, because you're probably going to want those Genestealers that come out of that area to pop out and charge whichever unit tried to remove that cult ambush. We then move on to Saintly Paroxysm. This is another stratagem that costs 1 CP, and it's described as follows. There are few more holy virtues in the cult's eyes than to use one's final act to lay low the oppressor. This is used in the fight phase just after an enemy unit destroys a Genestealer cult character model from your army. It targets that destroyed character model. You can use this stratagem on that model even though it was just destroyed, and the effect is to roll 1d6. On a 2-up, that enemy suffers d3 mortal wounds, and if that character model is an Abominant or Patriarch, that enemy unit suffers 2d3 mortal wounds instead. Yeah, I like this. When it comes to, assassins, within the Imperial agents, my favourite has always been the Evasive, because he just self-destructs when he blows up. I think I've always had this kind of thing for blowing yourself up since, a lot of the 80s films that I grew up with, Predator, when the Predator gets, when he loses, he's a bad loser, right? He blows himself up with a tactical nuclear warhead attached to his arm. You've got heroes within Starship Troopers, and again within the Aliens films, when they're about to die, they stay behind in the tunnels and they self-detonate themselves with a grenade. It's that kind of epic moment that you can recreate on the battlefield here with your Genestealer characters, and it particularly works well with the Abominant or Patriarch. But here's the thing, right? It's the opposite of that. When we've seen it in the films, it's always the humans, right? The heroes, the good guys. Now we get to do it back to them. Essentially, we get to blow up with acid-like blood, if you wish. We get to have a frenzied sort of death throes and kill loads of models and enemies around us as we die. Particularly useful with the Abominant or the Patriarch also, which are going to be character units that are in the forefront of the army. They're going to be possibly within the Vanguard. They're certainly going to be in the thickest of combats. They are best combat characters. And so this particular stratagem is very good on the most part. Most stratagems that work when an enemy kills your unit, that's a negative. You don't want your models dying, but if they do, well, it's nice to have this as a backup. So, it loses it out a little bit because it requires you to lose a model for you to use it, but it's actually really, really good. Because being able to inflict between 2 and 6 mortal wounds to your enemy just in revenge, not only is that Hollywood epicness, but it's actually quite powerful and can finish off quite a powerful enemy that you've already taken a good chunk out of. Now, the only other negative about this is not only do you have to use a unit to be able to use it, but you've also got to roll a 2-up. Now, the odds are in your favor, but we all know how hard it is to roll a 2-up on a single dice. Anyone who's played Dark Elder with Shadowfields out there or has a Terminators, they'll know that ones on the dice, they turn up far often than you would like. So that is a big negative. I don't like probability when you're already spending a command point to get it. I can go with it with our special cult ambush special rule and stuff. Yes, it's cost free in essence, but when we're already paying a command point, come on, make it certain. But I suppose at least it's a 2-up and it's not like a 4-up or something silly like that. So, the fact that it gives us a very good chance to inflict a reasonable amount of wounds, which again are variable, 2d3 mortal wounds. I get that's being a variable, but first of all, having to roll a 2-up and then 2d3 and stuff, it's a little unpredictable, but it has the potential to be really good. And if you've got a spare command point, don't bank on this doing anything, but if you've got a spare command point and you do happen to lose a unit, don't go and get your Patriarch or Abominant killed on purpose just to be able to use this. But just know it's there for if the enemy does take out one of your major characters, then you've got options to get the heroes back for once. Take that, good guys, right back at you. Now we progress onto Gene Twisted Muscle. This is another 1 CP stratagem described as such. The raw strength of those infused with the Patriarch's distilled power is undeniable when directed against the foe's hulking tools of tyranny. It is used in the fight phase, and the target is either one aberrant unit, Biophagus, or pure strain Genestealer unit from your army that has not yet been selected to fight in this phase. And it affects them by until the end of the phase. Each time a model in your unit makes an attack that targets a monster or vehicle, add +1 to the wound roll. It is at this point where you cue the evil laugh. Yeah, this is good. This is a good stratagem. It's the best stratagem we've looked at so far. You know, the first two, Evasive Vanguard and Saintly Paroxysm, can be good under certain circumstances, but they require the enemy to do something. They require a reasonable amount of luck to even come into play to start off with. And so, yes, they have their place, but, you know, they're certainly not adding a lot to the detachment. But this particular stratagem turns our Muscle Beach from Blackpool Pleasure Beach to Venice Beach, California. This is really good and really decent, and extra decent in a GSC army list, because one of the things that we struggle with most is the big old Griblies. So much so that I actually think this is a deliberate evolution from the hive mind, preventing us from defending ourselves against the upcoming Tyranid invasion when the Star Children arrive. What if the local population goes, no, actually, we've done all the work and we're going to keep the planet. We're not handing it over to you. So perhaps the Tyranids have just covered their ass there, made sure that we can't kill hive tyrants and the like. But regardless of reason, it's probably just the writers. We certainly struggle very much against monsters, and certainly units of monsters. As I say, a particular one that comes into mind is the Hive Tyrant with Tyrant Guard. We're not shifting that unit. We're just not. But on top of that, you know, we're not that great at destroying vehicles either. We have some degree of answer to them with the heavy mining lasers and stuff. But again, it's something we somewhat struggle with. So having this stratagem of Gene Twisted Muscle, getting +1 to wound these particular targets, goes a long way to narrowing that gap of ineptitude. And so this stratagem would be an excellent stratagem in any army, but it becomes S tier for us when you consider the overall army list. So overall, A+ with that. The others, B-. Swiftly moving on, it's now time to look at the Hyper-Metabolic Vigour stratagem, described as evidence of the bio-horror taint in their veins, the most blessed of occult exhibit an inhuman swiftness. This is used in the fight phase and can be used to target either an aberrant Biophagus or pure strain Genestealer unit in your army that has not yet been selected to fight in this phase. And it affects them as follows. Until the end of the phase, each time a model in your unit makes a pile-in or consolidation move, it can move up to 6 inches instead of up to 3. In addition, it does not need to end that move closer to the closest enemy model, providing it ends it as close as possible to the closest enemy unit. Now, this particular stratagem can bring in all kinds of shenanigans. Shenanigans such as using that 6-inch movement with less restrictions than normal to swamp your enemy and as a result cause desperate escape attempts. However, more valuably, you can use this as a consolidation move, moving a whopping 6 inches towards the nearest enemy unit. 6 inches is more than enough most of the time to get engaged with that unit that thought it was once safe, and so you can roll from one combat to another. Now, typically this will require 2 units attacking the enemy that you're engaged with. The first unit wipes out the unit, and then the second unit consolidates towards the enemy unit that thought it was once safe. This can have some particularly devastating effects and can again help keep you the momentum of just moving forward and engaging the enemy, which is where this army really specializes and excels, not only because it's got a decent amount of attacks, high strength attacks, high damage attacks, but also because this is where our models are safest. They are tough in combat, they are hard to get rid of, but with the right guns, well, basically, if you've got a tin opener, you can open up a tin, but as I say, up in close combat, if that tin's got big bulking arms with claws on the end that are swinging at you, there's not much you can do. It's better just to shoot it with a gun. And so actually, to conclude here, we have an excellent stratagem that can be a little tricky to use, but when used correctly, can be used devastatingly. That then allows us to move on to, or consolidate onto, the next stratagem of Stimulated Biosurge. This is described as triggered by Xenos biostims flooding their bodies when the cult's predators bring their traps. The jaws close inescapably. It's used in the charge phase on either aberrant biophagus or pure strain genestealers unit that has not declared a charge this turn. The effect is that until the end of the phase, each time your unit declares a charge, if the closest eligible enemy unit is selected as one of the targets of that charge, add +1 to the charge roll for each selected target of that charge, including the closest eligible enemy unit, up to a maximum of +3. And this stratagem, amongst many of the individuals who are on the Genestealer cult forums and Facebook groups, believe that this is by far the best stratagem available to this detachment, and for good reason. It's excellent. This is one hell of a good stratagem. Being able to add +1 to your charge roll, that is always a big bonus, especially in an army that can deep strike. Every unit in your army can basically deep strike, and so having that as a stratagem normally is good, but is doubly good in our army. But it becomes triply as good. It's a triple stack, lads. It's a triple stack when you consider that you already get +1 to your charge roll because of the detachment roll of Hypermorphic Fury. This means you are now getting a minimum of +2 to your charge range. Wow, come out of Deep Strike and having to roll a 7 to charge straight out of Deep Strike, well, that is very, very spicy. But the spiciness doesn't stop there, because for every enemy unit you declare your charge against beyond that first one, you get an additional +1 to your charge range. Now, that can be somewhat difficult, but remember, guys, you have the initiative. You're deep striking or coming out of cold ambush. You're dictating where your units are most likely going to fight, or you've simply popped out of a transport and you're charging headlong into the enemy. Which means if you position your troops cannily enough and the enemy gives you the opportunity, which is more often not going to happen at least once in the game, then you can easily find yourself making a charge, for example, against a unit that has only just disembarked from a transport and their transport. Getting a double charge off against two units that are, in essence, the same distance away from you, well, that's not so difficult. And so, if that is the case, if you can engage or try to engage two units when you make your charge roll, you're getting a massive +3 now to your charge roll. Now, I can't see a scenario where you're going to be able to engage, a third unit and as a result get a +4 bonus to your charge, +3 from the stratagem and +1 from your detachment roll. But, stranger things have happened. But getting +2 is almost certain. Well, it is certain. But getting potentially +3 to your charge is also quite likely, as long as you spot the gaps in the enemy lines. And as mentioned before, being up close and personal, being up in the grill of the opponent, That is where we want to be, because it is where we do most damage, and it is where we are safest and hardest to kill. And so this is a top of the class stratagem for this detachment. It is the best we have because it is just so usable. You will be using it multiple times in a game and to great and absolute effect. That bonus is absolute. There's no chance, there's no indecision in what it does. You know exactly what it does, and if you play the game cannily, if you play it with that Xenos intelligence that GSC players are known for, you can get huge bonuses out of this stratagem and almost guaranteed success. And then we finish with, well, I would like to say the last but not least, but what is truly the least of our stratagems. So we go from the best to what is most definitely the worst, and a stratagem that probably won't see much use, if any use, within our armies. And it's called the Biohorror Revelation. It sounds awesome, but it's not so good. It's a strategic ploy stratagem. It's a bit of a tongue twister, that one. And it's described as follows. Face to face with hideous genetic monstrosities, their full horror can shake even the most stoic soul. It is used at the start of your opponent's shooting phase, which is nice. Having a stratagem that you can use in the opponent's phase, turn, that's a bonus. I like them. I like messing up the sort of the momentum of the enemy, messing up with their game plan, so to speak. And it can be used on an aberrant, biophagous, or pure strain Genestealer unit. And the effect is as follows. Until the end of the phase, each time an enemy unit within 9 inches of your unit is selected to shoot, it must take a leadership test, subtracting 1 from the result. If that test is failed, until the end of the phase, each time a model in that enemy unit makes an attack that targets your unit, subtract 1 from the hit roll. Yes. I probably don't need to tell you why this is a little bit lackluster, but I will do so anyway because I just like to hate on this stratagem. It has potential, but it was just it just didn't evolve. This is an evolutionary dead end, and the Tyranids probably would have got rid of this as soon as they come on Planetfall. I very much doubt you're going to use this stratagem, guys. I mean, don't get me wrong, as I say, it can be used in the enemy's shooting phase. If you've got loads of command points, well, why not? I suppose use it, because it has a chance of doing something, and that's the key word as to why this is pretty damn useless. It has a chance to do something, and not a lot at all. And basically one of your units tries to be uber scary, like one of the ghosts in The Conjuring, right? But more often than not, this ends up being about as scary as Casper, the friendly ghost. Don't get me wrong, getting -1 to hit can be quite good, but the chances of getting it are so far against you, it's just not going to happen very often. Let's be frank, the basic meta out there are Space Marines, Custodians, these kind of super elite armies that just don't fail leadership tests. And even on the off chance that, they get really bad luck, their ballistic skill is still so bloody high that they're probably not going to really notice much of a difference with that -1 penalty. Now, obviously, against the right army, where you're surrounded by loads and loads of troops, it's worth that pot shot. 1 command point to potentially wreck a gun line made out of guardsmen, for example. You know what? That could be quite good at that point. It's certainly going to increase your survivability a little bit, but even guardsmen, guys, can pass their leadership. They're not terrible with the -1 modifier. And you know what? Again, in this case, even when they fail, they have a volume of firepower. They're still going to probably do a reasonable amount of damage to you, because all they do is concentrate their firepower instead, or give an order to negate the -1. Just give the take aim order and just be hitting on that standard ballistic skill anyway. And so yes, in principle, I like the idea of these kind of aura abilities. That just, it's so thematic that these guys are so scary that everyone nearby just quivers in their boots and kind of loses a bit of the discipline. I like it. I like the idea, but they just didn't go hard enough with it, guys. That's the problem with this particular stratagem. If they made it that, when you use this, because bear in mind, you're using resources for this. If this was part of, say, the army rule, you get caught ambush and this, you get it in addition to Hypermorphic Fury, I'd be cool with it. I'd be really cool with it. But because you're spending a command point to activate it for just a short space of the game, I mean, you really want it to do something or stand a very, very, very high chance of doing something. Like Sainted Paroxysm, it's annoying that it's a chance, but at least it's a 2-up, right? But this, failing a leadership check is it's very difficult to do. And as I say, if they pass their leadership checks, you get nothing at all from using this ability. They should have made it that you get -1 to hit. And then if you fail the leadership check, you get -1 to hit and -1 to wound. Or, something along those. Or maybe you can't even shoot at all. A bit like the old Magus ability that she used to have with the mind control ability, before they nerfed that also. This book is full of nerfs, right? But that would be something. It would have that little bit of fear aspect. Fear not only for the troops on the battlefield, for your little plastic men, but fear in the minds of the opposing player. Because if they do feel a leadership check and they cannot shoot at all, wow, that is big. That would be big. And again, that would make it okay. Yes, it's unlikely to happen, but when it happens, it has a really big effect. But no, you just get -1 to hit. This guys is an F. This particular stratagem, unless you've got 15 CP on you that you just can't do anything with, stupidly high amounts or something, you're not going to use this. So cross this off. So instead of having 6 stratagems, we've essentially got 5. 2 of them, the first 2, Evasive Vanguard, Saintly Paroxysm, require the enemy to kind of do something, either try to remove a caught ambush marker or kill one of your characters. That makes them inherently bad anyway, because you don't want that to happen to start off with. But if it does happen, you make a mistake or the enemy just does a really blindingly good play, well, you've got something to kind of, mop up the shit, so to speak. But then, luckily, we do end up with 3 tip-top, super duper, topped with awesome source stratagems that we can use pretty much turn in, turn out to boost army in key areas which it often needs boosting. Gene Twisted Muscle allows us to go after monsters and vehicles. Fantastic. Gives us that little bit of extra hitting power that we really do need. Metabolic Vigour allows us to do some real shenanigans when it comes to piling in and consolidation. It's a hard one to use, so maybe it's not quite S tier, but it's an A to A+. It's a very, very good one indeed, and when used correctly can actually win you games. And of course, we have what I personally feel is the MVP of our detachment, Stimulated Biosurge, which is more of a question, when do you not use it rather than when do you use it? You want this all the time. I wish you could use it more often, several times in a turn. Very, very decent stratagem indeed. And that really brings us to the end of this video, fellas and fellettes. We've done a basic introduction into the Biosantic Broodsurge Detachment there. I hope you're getting a little bit excited, getting a little bit of a chubby thinking about using this, because it is going to be a really decent detachment to use. It's had a bit of slack, on the forums and that, but I think that's just simply because, as I say, a lot of people out there think that this army is very one-dimensional, very predictable, very easy to deal with as a result. But when you look at the detachment rule, Hypermorphic Fury, and see that you can use it on a much wider range of units than what you would see on cursory glance, that in its own right just makes this detachment so much more usable. Getting that +1 to charge and +1 on attack to on Genestealer Corps, on aberrants, but then all of your basic battle line troops also potentially, as long as you add a Biophagus to them, is just that is major stuff. And when you combine that with a real S tier selection of enhancements, as I say, every single enhancement available within this detachment is top top class. It's so good. And then you look at the strategems, yeah, there's a mixed bag. There's some that you just never use, and there's some that you're going to be using too much of. You just simply can't get enough of them. But the good thing is, as I say, is that when I touched upon it with the Hypermorphic Fury, a lot of these strategems you're going to be wanting to be used on aberrants, and you're going to want to be using on genestealers, but a lot of them you can also use on those, battle line units, as long as they've got a Biophagus attached, Gene Twisted Muscle. You can use that. I mean, on Metamorphs, that could be actually pretty damn decent, cutting through monsters or, little groups of monsters and stuff. That's fantastic. Metabolic Vigour, might not be so useful on a small unit of aberrants, but if you use that on a 20-man unit of acolytes or something, not acolytes, neophytes, that again just has that amazing swamping power, just amplified by the fact that the troops aren't so good, but their numbers kind of, they have a quantity has a quality of its own, so to speak. And stimulated Biosurge also can be used along with Biohorror Revelation. The only ones that can't be used on the Biophagus units are Saintly Paroxysm and Evasive Vanguard. You don't want to be using them anyway on those units anyway. So you really do have a much more versatile army than what most people think. I want you to go out there, guys, like myself, and have fun making some army lists with this detachment. I've got some really good ones I'm going to be sharing with you, which will allow us then to get into more detail regards to the tactics on how to use this detachment or armies from this detachment. It's a little hard to just sort of say, oh, you do this, do that, or this combo here, without really showing you an army list and potentially putting it into play also with some battle reports later on. But overall, guys, really, this is my favourite of all the detachments, that and the Outlander Claw. But I cannot wait to get this on the battlefield and really get to grips with it. Otherwise, guys, that's it from me. So ta-ta, thank you, good luck, and have some happy painting and happy games ahead of you. I'm Big Al Devlin here at Nerdvana. Thank you and goodbye.